Welcome to the Greg Bennett Show. I'm your host, Greg Bennett, and today I have a delightful conversation with two legends, two icons of the world of triathlon and Ironman racing. Mr. Dave Scott and Mr. Mark Allen are on the show together. And in this episode, we go through the Professional Triathlon Organization, we talk about the Collins Cup, we talk about Kona Ironman and what we should do about it with it being cancelled or postponed. And then we finish with some really fun rapid-fire questions. Now, a little bit of housekeeping before we go on. Firstly, thank you so much for listening. If you are enjoying the show, you'd be doing me a huge favor if you'd be willing to share it on your social platforms, and or you can support the show by supporting the show's partners, Athletic Brewing, Athletic Greens, Hyper Ice, and Form Smart Swim Goggles. They're just all great companies with really fantastic products. You can't go wrong with them. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I do. And remember, success comes to those who endure just one moment longer. A quick mention of the show's partners. These are all great companies and products that I use daily. If you want to support the show, you'd be doing me a massive favor by supporting these brands. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Brewing. Anyone will tell you that I'm someone who loves to have a beer, and there's always a beer in the fridge for me and or guests that pop in. But with kids, my work, and just my overall health, I can't, and I don't drink often. I can't afford to not be on my game, and I simply don't like the foggy feeling I get by drinking alcohol. So I've tried non-alcoholic beers, but I guess I'm a bit of a beer snob because none of them have measured up to a real craft beer experience that I like. But now with Athletic Brewing, I can have a high quality, just flavorful and award-winning craft beer, and it's only 50 to 70 calories per can. And these beers they fit into any occasion, so I don't have to compromise on my social life or choose between having a great beer and just keeping my clarity. So go ahead and check them out at athleticbrewing.com. That's athleticbrewing.com. Or you can find them at your local liquor store or bottle shop. I'll let you know. I'll be having one every single episode I record. They're that good. This episode is brought to you by Hyper Ice. Hyper Ice is my go-to solution for recovery and restoration. The handheld percussion therapy devices, the Normatec boots, and the vibrating rollers all release your deepest muscle tension and just aid your recovery. I own the Hypervolt Plus, I own the Hypervolt Go, the Normatec boots, and the vibrating rollers. And both my wife Laura and I use them every day before and after workouts and before bed. They're all just so easy to use at home. They're quiet, easy to charge, and have ready at any time. I encourage you to look after your body. Honestly, it's the only thing you get to keep for all of your life. All these Hyper Ice products are just simply brilliant. Get 10% off all Hyper Ice products using the exclusive Greg Bennett Show code GREG21 at checkout. Go to hyperice.com, that's hyperice.com, hyperice.com, and use code GREG21 at checkout. This episode is brought to you by my longtime partner and amazing company and brilliant product, Athletic Greens. I'm using Athletic Greens every day. Great taste, so quick and ready to go. Athletic Greens is a delicious blend of 75 superfoods and vitamins, minerals, probiotics, and a greens blend and more to support gut health, energy, and immunity and stress. I've also been doubling down on Athletic Greens vitamin D. A huge portion of the population are vitamin D deficient, myself included. And right now, Athletic Greens will give you a year's supply of vitamin D for free and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Do yourself a favor and sign up. It makes a great gift for a family member or a friend. So sign up now and get a free year of supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase by visiting athleticgreens.com/Greg. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Greg. This episode is brought to you by Form. In my opinion, Form Smart Swim Goggles are the biggest thing to hit the swimming world. With Form Smart Swim Goggles, you can see all your key metrics while you're swimming: your distance, your pace, stroke rate, and heart rate. The swim data is displayed on the goggle lens, and you can customize the display to see the key metrics that you want to see. I couldn't believe it when I first tried them. They fit like normal, comfortable goggles, and the display is there, but it's not in the way. I consciously look at the lens to see my stroke rate and my pace and my heart rate and distance. If you're a pool swimmer or an open water swimmer, I encourage you to check these goggles out. Please go to formswim.com/Greg. Again, that is formswim.com/Greg and get $15 off the Form Smart Swim Goggles at checkout. or use code GREG2021 at checkout. All right. These days in the sport of triathlon, we love to throw around the names like Jan Frodeno, Alistair Brownlee, Javier Gomez as being the greatest of all time. And obviously they're a part of that conversation. But when I rewind the clock, there are other names that we really need to throw into that discussion. Simon Lessing, Scott Molina, Greg Welch, Brad Bevan, Mike Pigg. The list goes on and on. And then there are two that I look at that influence my desire to become a professional triathlete more than anybody else. I believe they've impacted the sport more than anybody else. They've been on this show separately in episodes 5 and 7, and today I'm joined with both of them on the show together. And I have Dave Scott sitting with me in studio and Mark Allen calling in. So thank you and welcome to the Greg Bennett Show. Once again, Mark and Dave, how are you guys?
Awesome. Great to be on, Greg. Great to be on with Dave. As you said, we both kind of did our thing years ago, and hopefully that inspired a few people. And so it's just great to see things carrying on after our illustrious careers and timely retirements. So
that was a lot of verbiage, Mark. Nice to be here, Greg.
We need to give Dave some coffee, Mark. He's sitting across me half asleep. We had some technical difficulties getting started here, and we used up all of Dave's good time, I feel.
So a little bit on the lengthy bandwidth here, but I'm willing to sit down for another 4 minutes. So let's carry on.
Well, it's great to have you both. We all had a lovely time in Slovakia. We all made it home, which was nice. Did you guys see that quite a few got actually positive tests and couldn't get home?
Yes, we heard that. And I actually heard, and I'm sure Mark knows, Karen Sminer is the USA coach, tested their PCR, came out positive, and 3 athletes that I know of. And Mark, you may have an extended list.
Wow. I didn't realize Karen was one of them.
Well, she had her first PCR test, just to back up, to get back into the United States from Europe, you have to have a negative PCR test within 72 hours of your flight, which even if you've been vaccinated, going over, all we had to do was show a vaccination card or a negative PCR test. Coming back, doesn't matter what you've done with the vaccination, you still had to get the negative PCR. So the race organizers had a mobile testing unit come into the Collins Cup the day prior to the race, and any athletes who needed to get tested to get back to their respective countries was given a test. Karen's result came back. The word that they used was questionable. And so she got that result late in the day of the Collins Cup. So that evening she had to quarantine in her room. They gave her another test, and that test came back negative. So she was cleared and good to go. So fortunately for her, she was not one of the ones who was held over for a lovely all expense paid vacation in Slovakia.
No, I was talking to Ben Canute on, was it 2 days ago? And he said, I just got the negative test. And I guess the way he was describing it, they rank it from 0 to 40 or whatever, and 0 being the worst. And he said himself, I think he said Paula Finley's parents, or they all were in the 30s. And so they were on the 30s all week. They kept getting positives. Tommy Zafiris, Katie Zafiris' husband, and photographer, and he was in the 20s. And so they all got negative tests a couple of days ago after having a good week there. And I think he was still there waiting to get his negative test because he wasn't getting over that 40 mark. So we made it home, guys.
yeah. 2 of the, Ben and Sky Munch made it. They were able to get that negative test. They were able to get a PCR test that was negative on Friday. Ben, unfortunately, was still positive. So apparently he can't get another test for
Tommy.
Sorry, Tommy.
Yeah.
He couldn't get another test for another week. And so he's kind of stuck there, unfortunately.
Oh man. It's funny, when we were all going over there, I had my mother-in-law sort of saying, Greg, you sure you should be going? Oh, I'm fine. You kind of, and then when you're over there and you get that negative test back, you're, phew, I can get home. And then to hear positives, I don't know about you guys, I was kind of relieved.
Well, to hear the rest of the story, which you just outlined, Mark, I thought, oh boy, it's a nice training facility. So, if he's isolated there for a week plus.
But I don't think he can leave his room.
Well, he can't leave his room.
I don't think so, right?
Well, that's a real dilemma. He must have done a lot of push-ups then.
Yeah. Well, no, they quarantined them in a specific part of the hotel, and then they allowed them to actually go out and run on the track at super off-peak hours when nobody else was on it. So they had at least had the opportunity to.
That's luxury quarantining, isn't it? Gee whiz.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of think it'd be nice to just be home.
Oh, no, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. Where are you at the moment? Where's home for you? You're in Santa Cruz, right?
I'm in beautiful Santa Cruz, California.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'm sorry you're not in studio with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a dreamy place.
Yeah, it's a dreamy place. Well, mate, you guys have, you've relived your stories so many times, right? I mean, you guys do you get to the point that you're just over retelling the same stories?
Oh, yes and no. I mean, some people dive way back well beyond or race days. And there's a few hidden nuggets that pop up once in a while when people do their investigative work or they draw it out of me. But certainly the races, we've kind of gone over those and not, I would say, in the depth that maybe some of the historians out there want to hear it, but it's probably exhaustive to most people.
Mm-hmm. No. And you, Mark?
Every now and then something comes out that is new. And a lot of that is, it's actually, my perspective or Dave's perspective on the race, because, you compete and you have a performance, and in the moment, you think you understand everything that went into it and how you did it or how you didn't do it. And then over time, as you kind of reflect back, you realize that maybe what you thought was the real motivation or drive or mistake was one thing. But when you have perspective and distance and you're not as emotionally attached to what happened, you gain a whole other view on it. And so even like our race, our epic battle, 1989, there are still things that are coming to me like, oh, wait a minute, that's actually how that all transpired. And so, I think that's one of the golden things that both Dave and I have seen about sport is that, yeah, it's racing, it's competition, it's numbers, it's all that kind of stuff, but it also provides you with this real deep insight into yourself and the world and how you interact with it and relate to it. And over time, if you reflect on your performances and your training and what you did and how you did it, and maybe things that held you back in those moments that you overcame, it really becomes this rich, schoolroom for life. And that's what makes endurance sports, I think, so cool, because it's so much more than sport.
And does it feel like the older you get, the further removed from it, you were just better and better? Like the more you retell that story, do you guys go, yeah, we were rock stars? you know that whole theory.
well, Mark embellishes a lot of it. There's a lot of fabrication on his end. But, I mean, there are certain elements in that race in '89 that you go back over a year. And Mark and I did this sort of 10-chapter,
I remember that, yes,
dissertation on sort of the lead up, but it went back an entire year. And Mark had a terrible '88 race, and I had to bow out the day before the race because I had a knee injury. So it was really, sort of going back. Well, '87, I was able to win that year, and now it's '89. So there's a long lapse of time, and a lot of things happened during that time. And for me, my first son was born in August of '89, just a couple of months prior to that race. And I was so enthralled with Ryan. I just said, wow, this is much more important than this bloody race I got to do. But and I had a few kick in the pants by several people that said, Dave, you better start training. And I came back from doing Ironman Japan and had a pretty good race in August. But my wife at the time, I had given birth just a few days later. So it was getting closer and closer to why. I just kept thinking, well, I got to watch this kid develop.
It changes your perspective, doesn't it? But I also think, I always feel like a lot was made of that 1989 battle. I often feel like there was also that tremendous battle, like you referred to, just the 87 battle, where you actually, Dave, you overcame Mark in that one. And I like
the whole bracket. Because I think when you look at those 24 months and the story, like you said, you both missed out in that. I mean, you couldn't have written a better movie script. Do you know what I mean? Both the Titans have to pull out in 88, but then they come back together in 89. They've already had that war in 87. It really is a great little story. Do you know what I mean? You couldn't have almost scripted it better. Did you guys script it by any chance?
Well, I didn't script the finale, but I could re-script that if we could do that again. I don't think either one of us could get to an Ironman.
Yeah, no, it was scripted, but I just didn't follow it all the way through.
I'm going to change it up with a mile to go.
The best part about reflecting back and the history and retelling those stories is that we can embellish as much as we want, and the further it gets, nobody can confirm or deny. So Dave and I, we were running through town. We were running 17 miles for those first 10K. And people like, no, you weren't. And they go, yeah, we were. But no. And, I think it's probably like everything. You sort of forget some of the challenge and you remember the glory. But if you really do put yourself back in time, you realize, oh, wow, there were more challenges than I sort of just have on the top of my memory when I think about it. And as Dave mentioned, we did a 10-part series of kind of back and forth episodes that's on 1989thestory.com website, 1989thestory.com. And in that, we each really revealed that, we're not automatrons, we're human beings, and we each had challenges.
Don't ruin it for us, Mark. Don't ruin it. For me as a teenage kid, you guys were the gods.
Yeah, well, it's what happens at the end of the day, but it's what leads up to it that actually is, I think, really inspiring. So check that out if you haven't. And I think a lot of people will go like, wow, I can't relate to going a 8:09 or 8:10 or running a 2:40 marathon, but I can relate to having a child that is, pulling me in one direction, and I've got these athletic goals or maybe in a different direction. How do you reconcile those two things?
Well, look, today's conversation is not actually going to be about your past so much. We did that. If people want to listen to episode 5 or 7, or go check out 1989thestory.com. There's plenty there. But what I really wanted to do today is talk about the sport where it is today. We all spent some time together, like we said earlier in the show, at the Collins Cup, maybe just going through that and how that's maybe impacting the sport going further forward. And then, of course, Ironman Kona, what's going on with that or not going on, and basically anything and everything in between. But before we go on, Dave, I got you a beer, mate. Should we crack it open? This is the Athletic Brewing beer that are partnering up with the show. And it's been really, sorry, Mark, I should have sent you one. You should be cracking a beer with us right now.
Yeah, I'm left out, man.
Which one have you got, Dave?
Well, I can't really read it, but it's got a beautiful aqua label. It says Run Wild, and that seems appropriate. So it seems early for a beer, but what the heck?
Well, it's not that early in the afternoon. I'm drinking it upside dawn. So everybody, just a little sidekick here. We're having a little brew, Athletic Brewing. It is non-alcoholic, so we won't get too smashed on this side, Mark. Don't worry about it. Anyway, let's get going. Collins Cup. Actually, let's start with PTO and your guys' thoughts, because a professional triathlete organization in the 30, 40 years, 50 years they've been in the sport. I don't know about you guys, but in the 90s, I saw these things start up, disappear. I've seen them come and go. What are your thoughts on the PTO this time around?
Mark, you can take the lead. Go ahead.
Well, as you said, Greg, you've seen ideas come and go. People who've tried to organize the professional side of the sport and really build it up to highlight the talent and the skill and the demand and the commitment that these athletes have to their sport. None of them have stuck. They've had shelf lives of 2 to 3 years, and then everybody goes back and does their own thing. This feels different. The PTO has assembled such a incredibly talented social media team. They've really approached it from the perspective of, we don't want to just highlight Jan Frodeno and Daniela Reef. We want to highlight every athlete who's in that top 50 or top 60 or whatever it is. And they have done that. They'll post stuff and they'll go, what about these 3 athletes matching up because they're all great cyclists, or they're great runners. And they're, what they're doing is they're showing that every athlete who's a professional has a certain value and they bring something to the game. And so that, along with just being at the Collins Cup and seeing how totally exciting that race was, we were there, Dave and I were there, obviously. And so we can't comment on broadcast quality, anything like that. But
apparently the announcers were amazing.
Yeah. We stood behind you. Excellent.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mike.
they were saying Phil Liggett and some of those other guys were good. They go, what's Greg Bennett doing there? We don't get it.
Okay, you can shut up now. Oh, we can't hear you quite now, Mark. See you, mate.
Yeah, Dave.
What do you think, mate?
Well, I think what Mark said also brings out the personality of the athletes. And I think that's one big area that has been a void. We see the athletes, unlike tennis or golf, where you actually see their face and there's slow action. Quite often there's commentary going on during the actual match, even snippets. But in our sport, we've got helmets on. It's difficult to tell the genders at different times. And we don't have that interaction. So what PTO has done has kind of brought the athletes to the forefront and has introduced them individually for a lot of them. And as Mark said, not just Jan or Daniela. So we're starting to know Sam Long. We're starting to know some of the other athletes that aren't as prominent as the world's best. And we know them not only from their athletic talents, but from their character. And I think that's really important because people are going to either dislike, or follow or not follow. But I think that's the inherent part of anyone in sport. And, we've seen it in boxing where, we can go all the way back to Muhammad Ali, and a lot of people didn't like him, and Mike Tyson and John McEnroe in tennis.
But they had personalities.
They had personalities.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real plus. And the PTO has also selected different events. They put the prize money up, and they've been very supportive of the athletes and saying that, we are going to bring up the marquee of the sport in a lot of different ways. And they've stayed true to form.
And do you guys, when we look at the venture capital money that's come in, that's obviously been a huge booster for them. But the sustainability then, or the return on investment, a venture capitalist is wanting to know, do you think that's there for them? Is the sport in a place that, we can see a sustainable future where big corporations are going to want to partner up and we'll see more money coming in, not just from venture capitalists, but actual partners and sponsors?
Well, that's the goal of the PTO, is to build it to that point. And the thing that is very different is that it seems like there's a long-term vision from those supporting it financially right now. They know that you're not going to go from ground zero to having that kind of draw financially from partners and investors in 1 year, that it's going to take more time. And especially, look what happened with COVID. This race was supposed to take place 100,000 years ago, and finally it took place now. But so that's, I think, one of the big differences between this type of investment in the past and how it's being approached this time. They know that it's going to be a number of years before things are finally built to the point where it's like, oh yeah, these huge companies want to get in, because not only, triathletes are going to watch this stuff, great, but the average person is like, yeah, I want to watch the Collins Cup because it's really cool. It's a great format. I want to watch it. It's like me, I don't watch many of the sports that are in the Olympics, but I watch the Olympics. And I think that's where this is going to end up. The Collins Cup is going to end up as one of those type of things, along with some of the other events that they're they want to build and put in place.
Dave? What do you think?
I think we need to bring in the viewers that really don't have comprehension of the sport, but will find it really provocative when they see the dynamics of the sport and how we're presenting it. And so there's a couple of parts to it. Greg, you are on the broadcasting team. I think we need to get that person that's on the couch that maybe is a football addict, and they say, wow, this triathlon show's on, I'll just look at it for a few minutes, and we grab them. So I think the venues need to be exciting. We need to have the introduction of the athletes, which we both alluded to. And the presentation of the race has got to be a race. We can't show people out in a pasture riding their bikes flat out with no people around. And we're all familiar with, and you've raced on the grandest scale, Greg, when we have people around and they're surrounding the athletes, it also is exciting for the viewer on TV as well. And again, I can come back to golf or tennis, and they're right on top of them. Or, in this country, it's football, and the stadiums are crazy as of yesterday with college football. But people like that sort of manic behavior, but it also elicits the best response out of the athletes, and it brings the viewer to the excitement of that race.
Well, on that, it's like when we were watching the NFL games last year with the empty stadiums, you actually felt there wasn't quite the energy, right? It was kind of like, it just felt flat. And so, how do we get the crowds to be on the sideline of events like this one that's a 3-hour event? And, do we make it multi-loops? How do we get it so we have crowds around that? Or like the Tour de France does, they have a lot of crowds up the mountains and that kind of thing. And so that's going to be a work in progress, right, to try and build up the on-ground audience as well.
Yeah, and we've seen it, in different countries. Certainly seen it in Australia, your home country. We've seen it all around Europe, and some of the big dynamic races there have the crowd support, and we really want to put an envelope around the athletes with that crowd. And as you mentioned, the tour is, it's 21 days, and the hours are long on it, but they make it exciting. The excitement doesn't drop off when we look at triathlon. We have 3 different sports, and the interaction and going back and forth, it doesn't come down to the final climb. So I think our sport has that amazing interest, and we certainly have the talent to bring that audience in.
Yeah, there's moments throughout the whole show, whereas the bike race, you often wait for the sprint for the last, I often turn up with the Tour de France, the last 7 kilometers or whatever, and go, okay, now it'll be interesting, right? I mean, I don't watch the first 4 hours. I don't have time for that, but our sport at least has moments all the way throughout. Did this Collins Cup reconnect you guys a little bit with the sport? I know you're both coaching, you've got wonderful businesses and everything else, but Mark, well, firstly, Dave, you are the athleta. What is that? Emeritus honoree. What is even? What is your role over there?
Yeah.
and on that, Mark, you were Team US captain, which makes sense. But Dave, what were you doing over there?
Well, I'm not really sure. I had to come up with this glorious title. And I think to provide a plane ticket, to come over. Initially, I was going to be the captain, and I had a conflict with one of the camps that I teach in 2020 in Kona, and that didn't come to fruition. So they said, well, we still want Dave involved.
Of course.
So the Emeritus Award was the title that was given to me. I think it's just because I'm the oldest guy on the planet. So it was sort of nice being there, and I think your question, Greg, was just being around the athletes. As Mark said earlier on, it was such a stellar field, and to see these athletes, and we've seen a lot of them over the years at the World Championships, 70.3 and Ironman World Championships. But we had kind of a conglomeration of great Olympic distance athletes, and the representation worldwide was magnificent. So the racing and the pressure that a lot of the athletes felt as a team.
That was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was amazing. And that was a really magnificent moment that you could just feel that. And Mark was working with the athletes. And, as it came up to the last day, and he can speak on this, I just felt like the energy from the athletes, they had to perform for their team.
I'd agree. And right before I throw to you, Mark, but it was I felt that energy that week. I've never seen some of the greatest athletes in our sport almost be so nervous. This team concept of their points matter for their team to win. They didn't want to let each other down. Mark, you were in the trenches, mate. You were team captain. What was that like? With the energy around your team and reconnecting with the young US team. There's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, it was a very unique setup. All of the athletes, the team captains, the support crew were staying at the same complex. We were all eating in the same cafeteria. So it was the first time that I actually had the chance to sit down and talk with a lot of these athletes that I've seen their names and results, but I've never even met them, or maybe I've had a 2-minute conversation after an event and said, "Hey, great race," and that's it. So it was a real chance. It was a real chance for me personally to get to know the athletes, but as far as the team, it was also an interesting opportunity for a lot of the athletes to actually get to know each other. Like some of them admitted, like, hey, I've never talked with so-and-so, or I've never actually competed with this person, but here they are. And we've had conversations. And early in the week, there was kind of some intermixing of athletes at the dinner table between the different teams. And you could see as each day went on, that mix got less and less, and it became more like the team people were eating together only. And, there was one of the sort of criticisms going into it was like, hey, these athletes, they've already received their compensation and they're not going to race hard. Well, that got thrown out the window because of just the concept of a team event where, you gain points for first and second and third. It goes toward your team totals, and you're going to end up as a team for second or third. But then because of the time bonus points given, if you gain 2 minutes, 4 minutes, or 6 minutes on your competitors, even if you were in third place in the race, these athletes were going as hard as they possibly could because they didn't want to give up any of the time bonus points to the other teams. And so it was a very, very unique and completely exciting format. Usually at an event, everybody's racing together. You first, second, third comes across the line, then everybody else is as an afterthought. Well, not at the Collins Cup. You had 12 events, 12 matchups where there was first, second, and third. And that third place person was just as important as the person who got first. And, the athletes knew this, and they, none of them wanted to go home and have the other athletes look at him like, oh, you sandbagged because you were third place and you didn't give a shit. You wanted to win it. You were feeling sorry for yourself. No, they all went as hard as they could all the way to that finish. And just a multi, so many more layers of motivation to really give everything they had.
A quick mini break to remind you of the show's incredible partners. You can get 10% off all Hyperice products using the exclusive Greg Bennett Show discount code GREG21 at checkout. Go to hyperice.com and use code GREG21. A quick reminder to do yourself a favor and sign up to Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens also makes a great gift for any family member or friend. So sign up now and get a free year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase by visiting athleticgreens.com/Greg. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Greg. If you want to see all your key metrics like your pace, distance, stroke rate, and heart rate while you swim, you need the Form Smart Swim goggles. Go to formswim.com/Greg. That's formswim.com/Greg and get $15 off. Or you can use code GREG2021 at checkout. If you enjoy a beer but want to keep your clarity, stay in your game, then you have to try Athletic Brewing. I was just simply blown away by how good they taste. Just a true craft beer. Go check them out at athleticbrewing.com. That's athleticbrewing.com.
On that, talking about the athletes, Dave, standout performances. Were there any that you were like, wow, that was...
Well, I think in the men's race, obviously the big horses did extremely well. Jan was the king. Everyone knew he's the king, and he showed. And
he delivered.
He delivered. I think the add-on that we had for Rudy Van Berg was Colin, and Colin stepped in for the U.S. at the end. It was such a great race. My apologies for not remembering the international athlete, but they were battling for seconds.
That was Jackson Laundry. Is that the race? Which match was that one?
Mark would probably recall, but
I'm trying to think.
Colin Chartier and that wasn't.
It wasn't Jackson. It was.
We're doing poorly on this, but and we should know. But that race, Colin really was selected 2 days before the start of the race. He came over as an alternate. Now he's racing, and Mark again knows the circumstances on that. But that race came down in the last 500 meters. You could see both of them coming around. It was on the racetrack, coming towards the grandstands, and they were just completely throttled. And just to see the grimacing on their faces was out of this world. They were both,
it really meant something.
They were both tapped out. Colin ended up coming in second that race. And
it was Kyle Smith.
Yeah,
Kyle Smith. There you go.
Correct.
Yeah.
You know, what was interesting about that matchup is that Gustav Iden, obviously, he was the hands-on favorite in the matchup.
Yeah.
But Colin was, prior to going into it, he knew that nobody was looking at him like he was a threat to even get, he'd be third and he'd probably be, 6 minutes back, if not farther. And he's like, I have hit numbers in these past 2 weeks that I've never hit in my training. He goes, I am ready for this. He was so fired up. And unfortunately, right toward the end, he was ahead of Kyle. And unfortunately, he had to make a quick pit stop with just maybe 1 or 2K to go in the race.
Oh, come on, Kyle. You don't stop.
Kyle didn't stop. Colin had to stop.
Colin, don't stop.
And so Kyle had to, Colin lost about 40 seconds and he goes, I am not letting this guy beat me. And he just started sprinting and he sprinted the last little bit. And as you remember them coming into that final stretch, they were going full speed ahead and Colin was ahead of him. And I didn't know that this little thing had transpired just outside the stadium, but really gutsy performance for sure by Colin Chartier.
Good one. That's a one I hadn't thought about talking about, but that's the thing. There were so many stories in here. Obviously everyone's talking about Jan Frodeno's great performance, Taylor Knibb.
Taylor Knibb, I think, stole the show.
I think she stole the show. And not only was her individual performance, but she put the US team on the map because this was all about Europe's to lose, right? They had 23 world titles and 1 Olympic gold compared to Lionel Sands has an ITU World Long Course and Katie Zafiris had an ITU World Series championship. And that's between the other 24 athletes, the other 2 teams. That's all the world titles they had compared to Europe's 23 world titles and 1 Olympic gold. So it really was an outstanding. It was Europe's to lose. And the US came out rocketing, didn't they? I mean, with Jackie Herring and then Taylor Knibb. I thought it was fantastic. It made a real show of it.
Well, Taylor Knibb was in that leadoff and Jackie was in the second wave and or second, third
wave, I think. Jackie was in, yeah.
And Taylor just, seeing her on the swim and she opened up this lead and I think we all recognized Daniela Reef was not on top of her game, but what a superstar to race against as a 23-year-old young woman in this sport. And Taylor Knibb was riding a road bike, the only road bike, and watching her on the monitor, looking over your head, Greg, while you're doing the broadcasting, she's brilliant. She looks smooth. She's got the lead on the swim and continues to extend it. And she just seemed unfazed by, taking us out and really dominating that first race. So it did parlay well for the U.S. men and women. Like, wow, she set the bar pretty darn high.
Yeah.
And she was the only one who, as Mark was talking about the point structure, which I didn't really understand until I was there, she was the only one of those 12 races.
Scored full points. 6 points, right? So that means she had to beat both her competitors by 6 minutes or more. That's right. So she was the only one. Is that right?
She was. I think Jan got 5 points and Taylor got 6. She was, for sure, for me, that was the outstanding surprise and performance of the day. When the matchups were being announced and the picks were being selected for the matchups at the opening ceremonies, which, by the way, Dave gave an incredible speech at. If you haven't seen it,
you did do a good speech there, mate. Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Mark. It wasn't.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, you can see it on YouTube. It's at the opening ceremonies for the Collins Cup. But anyway, the team captains, we all had 2 options on how to sort of structure the matchups. One would be, let's say, if Europe throws in Jan Frodeno, who obviously is the hands-on favorite to beat anybody, we throw in our worst person, because why waste somebody who could maybe win another matchup? Or we could go the other direction and go, well, let's throw our best guy at him, and maybe he'll be able to rise up and make an upset. But in any case, it'll be exciting. And so we went for the excitement. All the team captains from the various regions, we went, you know what? We want these matchups to be exciting matchups and to have. And if somebody pulls something out of their hat that nobody expected, then that makes it that much better, not only for the broadcast, but also for the team and motivation for that individual athlete. So anyways, when it came to, Karen and I spoke about it before the matchups, and we go, you know what? If we have the opportunity to choose who we put against Daniela. We're gonna stick Taylor because she's young. She's so strong on the bike, and she doesn't have any preconceived notion of how fast or strong Daniela is. So, a lot of the other women who've had experience against Daniela, you can see it in the races. Daniela goes by and there's not a response. Nobody even tries to stay with her for half a second. So when Taylor's name was announced, she just gave this look like, oh, okay, right on. Okay, here we go. I'm ready. I'm gonna do it. And the funniest thing is, after she finished and saw, the final thing of what was going on with Daniela, she goes, I'm just so bummed that she wasn't on top of her game. She goes, I wanted to race her, and I just don't know if I'm going to get many chances to race Daniela Ryf. And I'm so bummed it wasn't I just love that. It's just such a refreshing. She's representing what the future of the sport is going to be like.
Oh, for sure. I think you guys, we can keep going on about it, but I've said on this show before last year, and she reached out just to have a conversation. She's outsourcing. She's trying to figure out how to be better in every way she can. Yes, she has some physical ability. Her family love the sport of triathlon. I think they listen to this show, which is really great. But I think she's really just, like you said, she's that youthful exuberance that basically and no fear, zero fear. So just go for it. And so that was a real highlight of the whole day. Her year has been extraordinary. I think we're all getting to the point of going, okay, we're not going to get surprised anymore that she does, to qualify for the Olympic Games the way she did, to finish her race in the team at the Olympic Games was extraordinary. Then a second at Montreal, then winning the grand final at Edmonton in the World Series, second in Boulder 70.3, right in the middle of all of that. She's basically raced every single weekend. So it has been extraordinary.
And her time was over 3 minutes faster than the next fastest woman, who was Lucy Charles.
Which is amazing. Lucy Charles Barkley, moving over, isn't she just the full package? Honestly.
Yeah, I've always had the highest accolades for Lucy, and she's a magnificent athlete, but I'm also hypercritical of anyone that jumped in the sport. So I'm looking at her technique on the swim, and I've seen her swim many, many, many times. And I say, well, she's really rough with that right arm. I hope her coach is looking at her, and she's pushing kind of a big gear on the bike. I wish she could have a little faster pace. You're always trying to devour, what is working well. And in hindsight, how can you be critical? Well, unfortunately,
it's a high performance show. It's okay.
This is what we do. It's a high performance show, and I was lucky to coach some high performance people, Christy and Craig Alexander and Julie Divins, and you're always trying to better that one little seed. And so I looked at Lucy as she's racing Katie Zavaris and thinking, well, her swim stroke's a little rough. Her head's high and her right arm's coming in, and I think, well, who am I going to say? Well, here we are on the show, Greg, and I just said it.
No, this is what the show is about. The whole point is, Lucy, if you're listening, get to Boulder. Dave will help you out here.
Well, I'm sure she's surrounded by great coaching, but that's my my $1 comment.
No, and fair enough. I've just been impressed how she's able to go from super sprint to, I think she got 5th at the Leeds WTS right before the Olympics. She just got out touched to go to the Olympics for the 1500 in the pool. She does well in the, Chris McCormack Super League triathlon stuff. She performs well there. Then she does well Ironman. She has 3 seconds.
She's remarkable.
It is that. I think that's so. As much as she might be a bit choppy in the water, she's still quite extraordinary. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, come on. Her results are they're diverse, which is very unique these days. Back when Dave and I raced, there was an expectation that you would just be good at all distance events, all distance races at the same time. And that expectation has not been there for a few decades, actually. It's like, okay, I'm doing ITU stuff now. And then once I'm done with that, then I'm going to step up and then I'm going to do Ironman. Look at Jan Frodeno. And those who've tried to sort of bridge both distances haven't been able to do that successfully. Clearly, Lucy was just on the cusp of, getting to the Olympics, and I think she's a talent. Not only a talent, but she's a hard worker, obviously, and able to shift gears and do the distinct type of training needed for each unique distance. And a lot of athletes don't do that. They come into Ironman, they try to train like they're still doing an IT race, they blow themselves up. Or, Ironman folks trying to go back.
I know it too well, Mark.
Yeah. Or, folks who've done Ironman for a few years, and it's like, okay, I want to try and make the Olympic team again, but you just aren't able to devote that type of work into getting that real snap and speed back.
All right. Well, on a whole, Collins Cup, guys, firstly, if we had to score it out of 10, what would we give it? And then second part to that, what would we change to make it a 10 out of 10? So, Dave, you want to go first?
Well, I think the final show that the viewers saw, and I'm getting this obviously secondary, the programming for that show, and you were in the broadcast booth, Greg, I think as far as the visual that people are seeing, we've really got to bring that to the audience. What we had in being there is that we had 12 TVs. We had 12 monitors, 12 races going on simultaneously. And we had feedback on the differential between first, second, third, how that would be 38 seconds and then a minute 10 and so on. So we were getting instantaneous feedback. The viewer needs that as well. So and that can be done. And I think, the races, the uniqueness of the races and the jockeying back and forth and the interchange and the breakaway on the run and, going back to Colin and Taylor Knibb, right away, just setting the hammer down. We need to see that collectively and get a better pulse on the racing. And as you said, Greg, it's not just the final sprint in the Tour de France. We have this interchange. So bring that to the viewer. And I think that can be a big uptick on this first round.
So out of 10?
I'd give it about a 7.5.
Fair enough. Good. Which is not a bad start for an inaugural year in a COVID era. Mark, how about you, mate?
Yeah, I'm going to look at it just slightly differently. I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10 for a first year event. You never get anything right the first time out, and you always, in hindsight, see what could have been done better to make it an even greater experience. But I think, all things considered, first and foremost, that this event took place during a pandemic. You had a truly international field. You had the best in the world at that race, and it's probably the only race that's going to take place in 2021 with that quality, with that deep of quality of field. So I give it a 10 out of 10 for a first year event. But again, of course, what do you want to improve on? Well, there are certain things that could be improved on for sure. As Dave mentioned, we were in the broadcast booth, and so we had a screen that was showing every single matchup with every athlete and the speed they were going, the distance between each of the athletes. And not only that, there was also a real-time scoring that was showing, if the race stopped at that exact moment, who would be first, who would be second, who would be third. And that was updated one time every second. So in real time, we were seeing how the team leads were changing based on what was going on in each of the matchups. And we had, as Dave said, 12 monitors, so we could see each of the 12 matchups going on real time. If that was brought to the audience and then you have amazing world-class commentators like yourself.
Well said.
Explaining what's going on.
Thank you, Phil, for carrying the show.
Yeah, it would just be, I think it would be so captivating for people, because I have never seen real-time data like that where it's like, oh my God, Taylor Knibb's she's going 44K an hour. Now she's going 47K an hour. And the next fastest woman in any of the matchups is only going 42K an hour. You're just absorbed in it. And it's really, really exciting to have that. And then when you can see the camera with the leader, and then you can see somebody closing in from behind, and you can see the data and how fast they're running. That's the kind of thing that the average person sitting on the couch is going to go, hey, this is really cool. You got to bring that to them. And if you can, you're going to have people hooked and waiting, just salivating for this event to take place.
Well, I think you nailed it. I think the event itself was a 10 out of 10. I think the production and what we delivered to the consumer at home, I think Dave's right, it was a 7.5. I think there can be more information for that person at home. And there's only so much an announcer can do, and getting that information and relaying it over. And they were putting up little, as is, who would win if the event stopped right now kind of stuff. That was coming up on the screen. But like you said, we had 12 moto screens going on. We had a bit more of an idea. So I think we split the difference and we call it an 8.75.
I think that sounds reasonable.
Okay, you got it. I'll go with that.
But I think you guys both make some really great points. I think the only thing that I would like to change, and you guys, I do think the athletes deserve a qualifying appearance money. Unlike when you go to qualify for Kona and you're out of pocket 10 grand with your VRBO, your airfares and everything, that you're there for 2 weeks and you come 11th and you go home with nothing. I do think there should be a qualifying bonus, 5 grand, 10 grand, whatever it is. You qualify for the Collins Cup, you're looked after, don't worry about it. But I would like to see racing for prize money. I think I think it definitely should be team. I think, if you Team USA wins and you split $1 million between the team, and I'd like to even see it where the winners really get it. Horse racing where it'd be like $1 million for a win, second is 200 grand and third is 100 grand. So you're still walking home with some money in the losing team, but it's about the win. For me, that's what high performance is about. We should be encouraging the win. So long as we take care of, you're not out of pocket. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree, Greg. I think that also brings the viewers in. When we're looking at a golf tournament that ends today and the winner gets 15 million today, 15 million first prize.
Wow.
And I was just reading about this morning, and tennis is the same thing, $1 million purses and so on. And it's obviously scaled down. The interest goes up with the viewer.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, these athletes are incredible athletes and they're vying for a big purse at the end. So I agree 100% with you.
Yeah. Mark, what do you think? Prize money?
Actually, Karen and I talked about that Karen, Dave and I talked about that as something that would be really, I think, very exciting. If the team that won got a big chunk of money and then they got to split it between their athletes, and second was a different number, and the third place was obviously a lower number. I think that does add another huge level of credibility and interest.
Yes,
people watching, they want to know that these people won a bunch of money that would take them 10 years to make. That's that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's enough on the Collins Cup, though, guys. And I think we all enjoyed our week of just getting together and catching up, to be honest, after 1.5 years of COVID and not being able to see anybody. Everybody was so happy to see each other and see a great event. But moving on.
I'm just wondering why Dave and I look so much more fit than you did. I don't know.
I know, mate. I've let myself go. I won in a 3-year-old. You give up.
That's not true.
I know. You guys look fantastic. Actually, I went for a run with Simon Whitfield, who put on a couple of little pounds, and all the hecklers. We ran past when everyone was getting their COVID tests in the morning, and all the athletes were there. I've never been heckled so much in a run in all my life, as we ran probably 10-minute mile pace or whatever that is, 16-minute Ks.
well, you ran. I was there getting my test, and you ran by, and you go, "Don't worry, this run isn't a comeback." And I go, "When are you going to start running?" They were going. If you guys, you had to see how slow they were running. It was very impressive.
They were just starting out. You didn't see as we went around the corner.
Well, okay, yeah, you were sprinting after that, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right, guys. Ironman Kona. What have we thought? What are we doing? I mean, obviously, this isn't their fault now that it's been cancelled or postponed. This one. What do you think? What do you think about the postponement and where they should move it to and everything else? Mark, what do you think, mate? Should they have another world championship or just keep waiting and waiting?
Well, like you said, it's not Ironman's fault that the event was postponed again. It was a decision that came from the state government. So, Ironman, even though Ironman itself has put in place incredible amount of social distancing and reduced contact points and done everything to actually make an athlete who's there competing pretty darn safe and very unlikely that they're going to be exposed or contract COVID. You've got tens of thousands of fans who are going to end up coming, and the infrastructure in Hawaii is just not, it couldn't handle a huge influx of people getting sick or injured or, anything like that. So I understand their decision. So where does that leave Ironman? You've got a few options. You just keep waiting it out, hope that February happens. If it doesn't, then you're going to October 2022. Or do you go, well, let's have some event somewhere else and call it World Championship? There is no good solution. The thing that makes the Ironman World Championship what it is having it on the island of Hawaii. It would not be the same race if it was held somewhere else. Like, you could have the French Open on, you just couldn't have the French Open on a clay court in Indian Wells. It wouldn't be the same. And so I think it's the same thing. I think, this was a big topic of discussion among the athletes over there in Slovakia, in Šamarin. They were like, well, why isn't Ironman just having at least a pro race somewhere else and have it in Florida, have it somewhere that we know that we can have it, and at least call it a World Championship? That's just not a good option, I don't think. I think we just have to weather this out and just say, you know what? It's going to be really tough. It's tough for those who qualified in 2019. If they can even race in 2022 or whenever the event happens, it's going to be tough for legacy athletes. That whole system is backing way up. But at the same time, the Ironman World Championship should be something special. It should be honored, and not just sort of move because it's like there's a circumstance in the world. It's like, well, let's do it somewhere else. It'll be the same thing. It's just not.
What about when you think about a lifespan of a professional athlete?
It's unfortunate. This is not ideal. There's nothing ideal about this. As a pro athlete, you've got somebody like, you've got Lionel Sanders, you've got Patrick Lange, you've got Daniela Reef, you've got Jan Frodeno, who by the time 2022 comes around, they're almost 3 years older than the last time they raced that event. And maybe that's an advantage for some, the young folks. It's a complete disadvantage for those who are in the twilight years of their career, but it's just what it is.
So how many years would we allow it to go by without having an Ironman world champion? Like we say, okay, it's going to be 2 years now, 3 years, 4 years. I mean, at what point does Ironman start to say, well, we need to have a world championship, otherwise we don't. Like, I agree with you. I think Kona is the holy grail of our sport. I get it. But at what point do we start having a discussion going, well, we need to have something?
Dave?
Yeah, I agree, Mark. I mean, putting it off with all the circumstances, right or wrong, and trying to second guess, the mayor and the government and COVID and everything else is improbable and impossible. But it really does put the athletes that are at the end of their careers on a fence. And I think it does dilute and diffuse a little bit of the momentum of Ironman, the prestige of Ironman, and if we need to go to another venue, I mean, Kona and Hawaii are unique in itself, and the vegetation is unique, and going across the Pacific is unique. But if we could move that to a safe location, if that was possible, and it was still interesting and provocative for the world, and we could label that as a world championship, as we do with the 70.3 races in moving the venue, we're never going to be able to displace Kona and the Ironman in Hawaii. And it's like saying, well, can we move the Wimbledon? Well, not really, but the one major Ironman distance is Kona.
It is.
And when we look at tennis or golf, there's 4 or 5 different majors. So I kind of agree. If we let 3 years go by, ouch, that really is going to hurt the sport in a lot of ways. And it certainly is going to end a lot of the careers for the athletes.
But it's interesting, though, because even if we try and do a world championship somewhere else, even if we say Florida or Utah or Germany or whatever, people still may not be able to get to those places. Right.
That's the exact thing that's the other piece of it that I didn't mention is that, they could move it to Florida. They could move it to Cozumel. They could have it in Arizona in November, but that still wouldn't necessarily make it a true world championship because there's still going to be, the Asia Pacific folks who can't make it. There's going to be Europeans who can't make it. There would be a huge asterisk around it. Maybe not for the professionals, but for the age group athletes in the event.
And that's what the sport's about. I mean, what makes our sport so unique is that we all get to do it together. And I would hate to see that just have the professionals, because you guys coach a lot of the age groupers, and they love it. It's the fact that they get to race with the professionals, they get to be a part of it all. I think it would really cheapen the sport, because I really feel like that's what the sport is about, the combination of the two. So anyway, well, we'll just have to wait and see, and let's hope and pray that we get February up 2022. Because I don't know that there is a right answer at this point. It's just so hard to plan anything in the world at the moment. Anyway, how's that beer going, Dave? You enjoying it?
It's amazing. I've almost finished it here, and I'm going to open up the next 3 or 4 cans.
Here we go. Well, guys, I've got just one more area that I want to chat with you guys, and then we'll finish up with a few fast questions. But the sport of triathlon as a whole, and what you've seen change. You guys have been in it almost from the beginning, Dave. Mark, you're only a couple of years later. You've watched it change. What have been some of the things that, if I said to you, what have you really seen the biggest changes, whether we talk equipment, athletes, events? Has there been things that stand out to you that have changed over the last, 40? Dave's giving me the number. Keep going.
That would be 43.
43 years.
Wow. That's a lot. I did my first race in 76, so you guys can do the math.
There we go. Well, that's 45 years.
Somewhere around that.
I was 4 years old.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate. Sorry.
I think the biggest change, right or wrong, is that we don't have a real feeder program in a lot of the countries. So you can see the youth development and the notoriety, the prestige, and the development of some of the young athletes. But we don't really have that feeder program. And then also, are we in an exclusive sport that is just for the rich? And people to get to the venue, to buy the bikes, to pay the entry fees, and I understand the costs on it. I don't have an answer on all this, but we certainly don't have a nurturing program. And we see it in different countries. Australia is a good example, and they have the youth programs, and they have them on the beach, and they're in a tight little course to some degree. And I've seen this in Europe and in several European countries, and the clubs help the athletes along. We certainly don't have minorities in our sport. And I can speak for the States. We just, are we bringing that up? There's pockets that have been developed. So, how do we do that? I don't really have that answer.
Well, it is an expensive sport at the end of the day. And you probably touched on it, right? I think clubs are the only way to go forward, because clubs can then have equipment that's there. And because it's not just a matter of a soccer ball and, here's a couple of garbage tins and you can kick the ball in between. It is equipment based, and then getting to events and everything else. It's not a cheap sport. It really isn't. And you're right, Mark. What do you think, mate? Things that have changed, or things that you guys have been around. It's always great to hear the wisdom.
I think the biggest thing that has changed is that athletes now have access to really good knowledge on how to train. There are coaches, there's knowledge online, there's training plans, there's guidance, there are clubs all over with programs to help beginners get going. And so if you look at, let's say you go to the Ironman World Championship, and you look at the quality of, I'll talk about age group athletes. The quality of the age group athlete is infinitely higher than it was back when I started in 1982. There were no coaches. There was no knowledge base on how to train. People hadn't figured it out yet. Dave and myself and everybody else, we were winging it. Well, Dave wasn't winging it. He knew what the hell he was doing, but I was winging it.
I was winging it.
And so the average level of the athlete who has been in the sport for at least a couple of years is so much higher than it was 40 years ago. And so that's that's kind of a cool thing. It makes it harder to qualify for the big events, like Kona, and then there's the obvious stuff, technology and all that. But I think that's actually the biggest difference between the 80s and the 2020s. And people don't talk about that very much, if at all. It's always about, there's aero bikes and there's, all this stuff. And it's, are there problems, as Dave mentioned? There's a barrier to entry that is partially due to the equipment cost, but it's also partially due to the time expenditure it takes to train for 3 events. And one thing that actually was available in the 80s that I don't think is as accessible now are really good a lot of good high quality Olympic distance events. And that's the feeder system for this sport. If you are a marathon runner or a swimmer or, coming from another sport and you're thinking, I want to try a triathlon, it's a big leap to have your first race be a half Ironman. And it's certainly a giant leap if you're thinking you're going to do an Ironman. When we competed, there was, United States Triathlon Series. There were a lot of Olympic distance events all over the world that enabled people to get their feet wet and go, okay, I'll train a couple days a week and, I'll hack through it and see what I think. And you do, and you kind of go, this was actually pretty cool. And to have, 2,000 other people out there doing the same thing. And, that guy was on a tricycle too. So, I guess I'm not so out of whack, there is not as much of that anymore. And especially now with the pandemic, a lot of the independent, smaller race directors who put on those local events, they're out of business, which is super unfortunate for having that feeder system for getting new athletes, first timers into the sport, giving them that taste of what is really fun about it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the amount of people you hear the bucket list Ironman athlete, they hear at the office that some guy didn't know, I want to do an Ironman. It becomes that midlife crisis male sport to some degree. I mean, the females as well. It's a midlife crisis, that 35 to 65-year-old age group that are like, oh, my life's going to end and I haven't done an Ironman. They come into the sport and they leave and it goes. And so I think there's the entry level, but then there's also keeping people the retention level that the sport still has to work on both levels. I think the ITU is doing a fairly good job around the world of trying to keep branching out, trying to bring more countries in, trying to make sure that it's equality, I feel like the ITU have done pretty well on that over the last few years. And Mark, you talk about the physiology and the training. I've been blown away by just doing this show for these last 2 years and the sports scientists and coaches and things and even having you guys on and the amount that I'm like, wow, I could have been much better had I had that information at my disposal. Just some incredible minds that the way they're training now. I don't know if you guys know the Norwegian team and how they've been just, Christian Blumenfeld, Gustav Eden, these guys, and their coach, Harrelson, who's been on the show. It's phenomenal that they're lab rats and they're just trying to figure out how to become. They love what they do. By the way, they just love to train hard. They love it. And that's a huge thing. And then they're all really close mates. So they all push each other. And then they've got these science team that have them on treadmills and everything, testing everything. They share each other's information. And so, whatever Gustav's tests show, Christian's able to use that. And so it didn't surprise me at all, the success that they've had in that team. But I think that is because of just phenomenal coaching and the science now, what they know compared to what you guys knew. I mean, Dave, you were preaching carbo parties in the 80s. And
Yes, I was. Yeah, don't do that anymore.
And a little asterisk on that. Gustav Eden's time in the Collins Cup was only 10 seconds slower than Jan Frodeno's.
No, I know the guy's phenomenal.
Yeah, he is phenomenal. And the Norwegians are a good example because they've obviously dominated in Nordic skiing, and their application with Nordic skiing and the science part is obviously disseminated down. And Norwegians, as a whole, the country, they're amazing, both genders. But we have to pass that on also to the age groupers so that they have even a entry level physiological training platform that they can follow, and they have guidelines. And to some degree, we're all doing that in the coaching realm. We're trying to give them guidance, and it's based on evolving science. So the top Norwegians, yes, they've got a golden ticket and a golden plate, and I think other countries will follow. New Zealand is also there as well, but we certainly need this for the amateurs. And I think one area that, as you alluded to, Greg, that a lot of athletes are checking this off on their bucket list. And I think it's to a fault. And I don't like to hear that, but that I know that is kind of the quick down and dirty. Let's get this done and move to something else, to lawn bowling or whatever else you're going to do. But
which is really, by the way, lawn bowling. For all the lawn bowling fans out there,
it's an exciting sport, but we don't really have it as a lifestyle. So it's not the health denominator of doing triathlon, which we all know collectively is a healthy sport if it's done right and properly, and it's a lifestyle. And I don't think that information on health and aging and are you doing all the right things besides just swim, bike, run?
I know. Well, the health and the longevity, whatever people can learn, most people listening to this show already are pretty aware of that. But it is something that I think our leaders in the world can do a much better job of, rather than just, here, take this pill or this injection on this will solve the issue. And there's a lot more there.
All you have to do is walk through an airport and realize that the majority of the people either have no idea really how to truly take care of themselves, or they're unwilling to do it.
No, that's it. Or they don't have access to it. In fairness, I mean, it's it's easy to come from an area of white privilege, males as we are, but it's some people don't have access to eating well or the finances to eat because it's not cheap. But anyway, guys, this has been fantastic. Let's finish up with a few questions. Dave, I'll go to you first. What is one tip you have for people on just how to optimize their life or their performance in sport?
Wow, one tip.
One tip takeaway.
That's sort of a big umbrella task. I think it is sort of a segue from what I was just talking about. I think you really need to look and monitor as best you can on what you're eating. And there is good science out there on what to avoid just to start with, because a lot of the issues that we have with COVID are diet related. And all the major disease that we have are diet related. So I think for long-term health, and you add triathlon into that, which is a healthy component, I would really look at your dietary intake. And you just alluded to it, it's expensive, but there are choices depending on your socioeconomic status that you can eat healthy. So I agree partially with your comment, and I think that's my tip.
I like it, and we should, people that want to listen to your episode, I think your episode 5, you actually go into some great detail on how to optimize that. So people check that one out. Mark, what about yourself?
I think with sport, one of the greatest things is if you can have it become part of your lifestyle. There seems to be sort of 3 kind of categories. There's folks that they get up and they know that at some point during the day they're gonna move their body. And the human body is meant to move. It's not meant to sit hours and hours and hours on end. And you combine that with a poor diet, and everything that we see as far as health risks starts to materialize. And then there's the folks that are sporadic. They're on top of it for 3 weeks, and then a month goes by and they get locked into a work routine or whatever, and they just let it go. I just think if people could just carve out an hour, maybe even in small bits throughout the day, so it doesn't have to be an hour all at once, and just move their bodies, stretch their body, get it flexible, do something to challenge the muscles a little bit, get your heart rate up a little bit, they would find that the whole rest of their life is enhanced. You feel better, you would feel better, you would sleep better, you would have more energy, you would have more clarity in your mind when you actually had to sit down then and do your work, and stress would be less. And stress is a huge thing. Stress is the biggest negative influence on people's lives, both in general and also as an athlete. If an athlete is not improving off and even in their training that they're doing, should expect to see improvement. Look at stress, and that's probably what's going to be holding them back.
Good answer. All right, guys, let's finish with 15 really fun, fast, rapid fire questions. I'm going to throw to each of you real quick. Softball one, I'll start with you, Dave. What's your favorite family vacation?
I haven't had one.
Mark?
Going surfing anywhere.
Going surfing anywhere. All right, Mark, this one to you. Winning Kona World Championships or winning Olympic gold?
Oh, Kona, man.
Dave?
All the way.
Kona.
Yep. Dave, first car you owned?
I had a Datsun 510. Bought it for $750.
How old were you?
I bought it in 1970. It was 1974. And it was a hot machine.
Mark?
A Dodge Dart.
Dodge Dart.
Ooh, that's a bad.
Dodge Dart with a slant 6.
A slant 6. I love it. All right, Mark, what would you change about yourself if you could?
I would change the sport that was paying me because, as a triathlete, you had to do it for passion. You did not do it for the money. I would get involved with like boxing or something where you can make like $100 gazillion all in one match and then you just retire.
So you would have been a better physique, a boxing physique.
Yeah, me and Mike Tyson, we'd be going at it.
All right, Dave, what would you do, mate? What would you change?
You wouldn't have any teeth, Mark.
I could buy dentures with that kind of money.
I think it's probably manufacturing stress, which Mark was talking to. I have a tendency to bring that up to a crescendo, and if I could just monitor that over time, and it's an issue that's kind of plagued me over the years.
You should try one of these things that I got on my wrist here.
That looks like your kid's picture or something.
It's a Polo Neuro. It's a little vibrating thing.
I should try it.
It helps. I'll let you borrow it. Anyway, all right. Where are we up to, Dave? 2 most used apps on your iPhone or your phone?
I try to avoid those most of the time. I look at a lot of stuff on Twitter, but I don't answer it.
So Twitter and what else?
Probably my Apple Music.
Apple Music. Mark, 2 most used apps on your phone?
Well, I don't know if they're my 2 most used, but they're the ones that I think are the coolest. One is my maps. To be able to go into a city with a million one-way streets and not get lost, that's gold.
Change the world.
And then I actually do use my Apple Music for Zwift rides that I do weekly, put together playlists. And so it's really it's fun. It's simple. You can just do it. It's really cool.
Cool. All right. Mark, out of 10, how cool would you say you are?
Yeah, I'm somewhere between 1 and 10. There's days where I feel like I'm on top of the world, and there's days where I feel like a complete gomer. So it just depends on what I'm doing. When you surf, you can go the full gamut, because some days you pull off things that it's like, did I really just do that? And then there's other days where you can barely get to your feet. Like, I've been surfing 45 years and I'm struggling to get to my feet. How is this even possible?
That's
so
great.
I'm definitely somewhere between 1 and 10.
All right. And Dave?
I'm not cool at all. My kids would call me the biggest dork on the planet, but my candor is always a 10, and my coolness is probably a 0.5.
I love that question because people just feel very awkward about it. Anyway, let's move on. First job, Dave.
I taught swimming lessons, and I had all the troubled kids. I seemed to have a knack in just dealing with these kids that were tyrants. And let me go back. I actually mowed lawns for $1 an hour, and I was 10 years old. And so I mowed lawns across the street. That was really my first job. And then I taught swimming when I was 15.
Nice. Mark?
My first and my last job were actually, I was a lifeguard in San Diego. Did that for 7 summers. And since then, I've been searching for a profession, but I can't seem to find one. I don't know what's going on.
Still trying to figure out what to do with your life?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, important one. Which decade of music is best? Mark?
They're all great, but I have to say I was on the flight back from Slovakia. There were a number of documentary movies on the flight that you could watch and that had to do with music. So there was one on Aretha Franklin and Buddy Guy and Bob Dylan. And there was one that they did with Jimi Hendrix where he recorded a concert in Maui up on Haleakala in this natural amphitheater. And what they did is the day that he decided he was going to actually do it, they built a stage just out in the middle of nowhere on Haleakala, the big main volcano there on Maui. And it was way up high, like 5,000 or 6,000 feet. And so anyway, they went through the town of Lahaina with a couple buses and said, "Hey, Jimi Hendrix is going to be playing live. Do you want to come? He's giving a concert today." So they filled up a bunch of buses and they bussed these people up this mountain, and they had to walk like 4 or 5 miles through the middle of nowhere to get to where he was. And he played his first set. It was about 2 hours, and it was all his classic stuff. But the audience was, maybe they were a little bit under the influence of something, and they were just sitting there like little kindergartners, and they were barely moving. And he finally got pissed off. He's like, "You guys, you're not yelling, you're not getting up and dancing." And he goes, "I'm off." And so he went off stage, and the people who got him there, they're like, "You got to come on, we'll get him going." And so they got the people all riled up, and they're like, "Jimmy, you got to come out, man." And so he came out with this guitar that he called the Wing. And it's just a simple electric guitar. There was none of the stuff where he plays with his teeth and all that. And he played just blues, but it was blues Jimi Hendrix style. And it was the most amazing music I have ever heard. There is nobody on this planet before or after who could do it like that. So, Jimmy, wherever decade you're at, wherever you were, I'm giving it to you, buddy.
So it's not one decade; it's one artist that covers many decades. I like that, and I like the picture you painted. All right, Dave.
Yeah, I think it was back in the 70s because the artists didn't have all the synthesizers and added electronics that they can now dub in. Mm-hmm. It was just raw talent. And I think there's raw talent now, but as Mark was just mentioning, it's Jimmy and his guitar, and you see a lot of artists that came on that way. And whether you like the Beatles or not, I wasn't an avid fan, but I saw them on Ed Sullivan when I was just a kid for the first time. I said, they're amazing, but musically they were pretty remarkable, and their songs have a longevity, like a lot of artists, way back when. So. I don't know if it's just age that Mark brought up, but I would say back in the 70s, the music was pretty electric.
The 70s, I've asked that question a few times. Tim O'Donnell said 70s. Sam Long, 70s. There's a bit of a theme going on here. And what's great about it is in our car, I have Pandora going. My little daughter doesn't really get to watch anything. All the other kids in the neighborhood know this movie Frozen and all these other things. Our little one, you ask her what her favorite band is, she'll say Talking Heads. Her favorite song, 1999 by Prince, which is, we're going into 80s a bit here, but she loves Neil Diamond, Cat Stevens, John Denver. I mean, you go through some of the artists there, and it really is a remarkable era in music. Anyway, let's finish up with 2 more questions, guys, and then I'll let you go, I promise. All right. Dave, who would you want to play play you in a movie of your life?
Oh, wow. Who would ever want to do that?
What do you mean? I just told you earlier in the show that I think that era of the late 80s with you two, it's movie worthy, I'm telling you.
Oh, boy.
So somebody's going to play that. They're going to play that from the mid 80s when you guys started racing each other. They're going to play all the way through to your retirement.
Maybe Woody Harrelson. He's kind of surly.
He's kind of so.
He's had a kind of an eclectic mix of characters. I think he's pretty diverse.
I think so too.
Yeah, why not?
I like that, Woody Harrelson. Mark,
who would play me in a movie about me?
Yes.
I think it would have to be one of one of the Mickey Mouse Club dancer type dudes, just because they know how to move their body. And I, as an athlete.
That's not you. Why are you?
Well,
body? What kind of crap
Dave, you have never seen me in my moments where I'm moving my
They're
body.
They're doing a movie of you from the early 80s to now.
You're gonna have Zac Efron or one of those guys. So maybe you got Justin Bieber. I don't know. He can't move though. He's kind of fat. No, anyway, I don't know. That's a very good one. Tom Cruise, because he's so famous and he can jump out of airplanes. And I actually, there was a point where somebody was trying to put together a movie concept with, the whole thing around 1989 or whatever. And they were talking about who might play us. I don't remember what they said though. So.
Oh, we got to find that out. That'd be awesome, guys. Yeah. Okay, anybody listening out there? I know there's a few movie producers that listen to this every now and then. Let's make it happen. Did you guys ever watch this on a show called Peaky Blinders on Netflix? Neither of you. Mark, did you watch Peaky Blinders on Netflix?
I have not seen it, sir.
Best series you could watch. Go watch it. Unbelievable. Anyway, the main character in there is who I'd want to play mine. Cillian Murphy, his name is. Scrawny little British guy, but
I have to look him up.
Just very cool. Anyway, last question. Greatest movie of all time, Mark.
Well, the one that I've probably seen the most is Shawshank Redemption.
That's pretty good.
I asked Chloe that the other day, and he said Shawshank too. So there's two Shawshank Redemptions. Dave,
I don't know. I might have to end the show. I'd have to really think about that. I like great character acting, men and women. I usually like I've enjoyed a lot of the documentaries. Typically the one that has a dramatical point to it. There was a butler that was played by Anthony Hopkins. And I can't remember the lead woman, but they were trying to get together. Maybe it was sort of a mirror of my life. And they were, he was the butler and she also was doting towards this very wealthy person. And they were in the same giant sort of castle, and they had this sort of quiet love affair. And I always thought that was sort of a tear-jerking kind of movie. And maybe it's woe is me, boy. That should happen to me pretty soon. We actually collide with something. I wish I could remember the name of it.
So you're a dramatic romantic by the sound.
Yeah. That was and I can't think of the name, but I enjoy Anthony Hopkins. I like all of his.
He's brilliant.
Yeah, he's brilliant. He is really brilliant. I can think of some of that, scared the pants off me. But
Ironically, last night I had this dream about Meryl Streep. God knows why. And we were on a plane that was like this, like the space shuttle, but giant. It was like a commercial thing, right? And so I'm sitting in my seat, and then and I'm in economy class, right? I don't even dream of myself in first class. And so then all of a sudden I look over, and there's friggin' Meryl Streep, and she goes, "Hey, how's it going?" I'm like, "Oh my God, you're sitting there." And in the dream, I'd had two other dreams that I was going to be sitting next to her, and I was going to tell her, "I dreamt that you were going to be sitting next to me, and here you are." But I was so excited that this space shuttle thing stopped for a second, was on the ground, and I jumped off and I ran over, and my partner Katie was sitting and having a picnic, and I go, "Guess who's on the plane sitting next to me?" I go, "Meryl Streep." And then I look back, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I better get back on the plane, otherwise it's going to take off, and I won't be able to tell her that I had a dream about her, that I was going to be sitting next to her." And so what the hell does that have to do with anything? I don't know. You asked about movies, and there you go.
This is what I said before we started recording. I said, "Guys, I'm happy to go wherever we want to go." There we are.
You better turn Mark off.
Yeah.
All right, guys. This has been fantastic. It always is a bit of a thrill for me. I know I don't want to make you feel all weird, but it is, I was a massive fan when I was a kid watching you guys. So it is pretty cool to have you on my little show here. What's next, guys? You're going to St. George this weekend? Come out. Actually, this show will come out after St. George, but
we're world champion 70.3. So it's going to be a good show. I think unfortunately with COVID, it's going to be a U.S. dominated race, and we're not going to get the international athletes that we've seen in the past. But there'll be some great racing.
And Mark, what are you up to, mate? You got any?
I'll be Dave and I'll be joined at the hip. We'll be doing some ambassador work for Ironman there and helping out with a lot of the events, and just so I'm excited about it. Again, it's there are not going to be that many really, really big races this year as we've seen. So just the fact that there is going to be a 70.3 World Championship is really cool. So that's my next adventure.
I know. I'm jealous of you guys going. Well, guys, Mark, Dave, thanks so much for your time, guys, and coming on. I really appreciate all the stories. And for everybody else, you can find the show notes, timestamps, links, and coupon codes at bennettendurance.com/media. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This was fantastic. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Greg.
See you next time.
See ya.
Thanks a lot for listening to Be With Champions. If you enjoyed the show, your support would truly be appreciated. You can visit the Be With Champions Patreon page, or you can subscribe with your podcast app of choice. Don't miss the next episode, so subscribe and be notified. For show notes, if you want to know more, please visit bennettendurance.com. I'm Phil Liggett, and on behalf of Greg Bennett, here's to the next time, and I hope you will join Greg again very soon.